there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is yet another music-related video. And for this one, I'm going to be discussing my thoughts on the band Avantasia. I'm going to do a review of a couple albums. So I'm going to be reviewing a couple albums by Avantasia, as well as sharing my thoughts on a select track from their album Moonglow. Now, before I go any further and share thoughts on a couple of this band's albums and this band in general, I want to give a special shout out to Michael for requesting this video. And if there is another music related video, movie review, TV show review, topic that you would like to see me do in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. Link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, Avantasia it's a metal band. It's a band that does a lot of operatic metal, and it has a lot of symphonic stuff going on. So you could look at it as possibly being symphonic metal as well. Uh, it's a concept album band. So a lot of the albums are based around a specific concept or a story idea. And it's kind of a super group because is a band that has multiple different members that rotate in and out when it comes to each respective album. It started out as a studio only 2 album project, and then it became something bigger as the band grew and the albums became more and more popular. It's a creation of a really talented power metal, symphonic metal artist and Tobias Sammet. And that's why it's called Tobias Sammet's Avantasia. And the other members are Sasha Payeth, Miro, and Felix Bonke. And there's been so many different people who have done guest spots and been featured on various different Avantasia albums and songs. I mean, this is just some of the guests: Michael Kiske, Jorn Lande, Alice Cooper, Klaus Meine from the Scorpions, Dee Snider from Twisted Sister, Hansi Kirsch, John Olivia, Biff Byford, Jolyn Turner from Rainbow, and other bands, Tim Ripper Owens from Iron Maiden, Geoff Tate from Queensryche, Kai Hansen, Rudolf Schenker, who was also part of Scorpions and then had his own band, Bruce Killick, Sasha Payeth, Eric Singer, Bob Catley, Roy Khan, Russell Allen, Timo Tolkki, Rob Rock, David DeFace, Andrew Matos, Sharon Den Adel, Floor Jansen, Ralph Sheepers, Marco Hitala, Aaron Anthony Lucasen, Henyo Richter, Marcus Grosskopf, Jens Johansson, Eric Martin. Yeah, the same Eric Martin who did songs for Iron Eagle and stuff like that. Ronnie Atkins, Oliver Hartman, Millie Petroza, Candice Knight, and Amanda Somerville. So tons of different people who have done guest vocalist spots on various different Avantasia albums. Now, having listened to a couple albums by this band and select track from them from another album, I could say I definitely am a fan of this band. I liked it, what I heard quite a bit, actually. I think the albums are, as a whole, I would say they're not quite great because there's some tracks that are just kind of okay or tracks that I'm not super big on, but they're consistently above average, which is more than what I can say for some of the other artists and other bands that I've heard throughout the years. I am a huge power metal, symphonic metal fan. So this was definitely right up my alley. I love Stradivarius. I think Stradivarius is a massively underrated, overlooked power metal, symphonic metal band. And there were certain songs and um, certain bits of these tracks, like certain elements of the composition, that definitely did remind me of Stradivarius. And I also like Dragon Force, and there's like a lot of other, symphonic power metal bands that I'm pretty big on. This also reminded me of Savatage at points. It was Savatage, some of their later concept albums. So Michael asked me to share my thoughts on two albums, The Mystery of Time, Ghostlights, and he wanted me to. He asked me to do a reaction to Ghost in the Moon from Moonglow, but I just decided to share my thoughts on that track separately because I'm not really that good at doing reactions. Plus, this also gives me more time to be able to like listen to the song more than once, and that's really what I like to do when it comes to these music related videos. I really try to listen to these songs and these albums numerous times instead of just one time. So the first album I'm going to talk about is The Mystery of Time. This one came out in 2013, and this one, according to producer Sasha Payeth, this is the description of this album. It's a more fantastic production based a little bit more on orchestra work and keyboards. It's more like a film score to underline the whole story, the rock opera aspect, which was a choice on this one, and I think it works out fine. Also, this gives the album a face of its own, and it has 10 tracks. You have track one, which is Spectres, which has guest vocalist Joe Lynn Turner on it. And this is one of my favorite tracks from this album. The guest vocal work by Joe Lynn Turner is terrific. It's tremendous. And also, it's one of those tracks that has some really good instrumental work. Like the opening is like this synth instrumental mixed with some orchestra stuff, and it's really catchy and really cool and sets a really unique and genuinely awesome atmosphere and overall vibe for the start of the album. And then as the song continues, it's just a really well composed track with some great guitar work and vocals, and tells a good story. And it's a longer track, but it's not as long as some of the other ones. And there's a couple bits like I think kind of in the middle and a little bit near the end where it kind of drags a little, but for the most part, I think it's a really great a track overall. Really good opener for the album. And It's not my favorite track, but it's up there. Track two, The Watchmaker's Dream, which also features guest vocals by Turner. And I think it also has a lot of other, work by, Tobias Sammet and others from the band Avantasia. And this one I also don't mind. It's not as heavy as Spectres, but it still works in its own way. It's still got some good guitar work, and the vocals are still fine, and so are the lyrics and the chorus and everything. Um, it definitely is a lot lighter though in terms of its tone. Track 3, Black Orchid, is my favorite track of the entire album. Like I think that this track is fucking awesome. Like I honestly, I highly recommend, if you're a fan of power metal or symphonic metal, just go and listen to this track, because this track is tremendous. By Biff Byford, he was one of the guest vocalists. So it's not just Biff who's doing work on this, but you know what I'm trying to get at. The other band members of Avantasia, they add their talents to this track, and this track is just great from beginning to end. With the just searing vocals, the shredding guitar work, the orchestral composition, just everything blends together in a way that's just really, really cool, really, really satisfying, and immensely enjoyable to listen to. It's like a shot of adrenaline, really, every time I decide to listen to this track. And good lyrics, really catchy chorus and hook. Uh, Great song. Track 4 is called Where Clock Hands Freeze. This one features guest vocals by Michael Kiske, and I still like this one. But this one is another one where it's a little slower. It's definitely not as fast, not as heavy as Black Orchid. But it's a nice ballad. I actually like this track. There's still some good guitar work in here, and the vocals are pretty solid. So it tells a good story. Yeah, I like that track. That's a track that definitely reminds me of something that Savatage did with their concept albums in the 90s. Track 5 is called Sleepwalking. I'm not really a big fan of this one. This one's like a duet, and this song sounds like it sounds like something you would hear on Now That's What I Call Music Volume 50 or whatever. This does not sound like it's from the same style and the same album. Like, this sounds completely different than any other song on the album in terms of the composition. It's sappier. It sounds more like a pop song. I'm not a fan of it. I really don't like this track. And it's funny, it's called Sleepwalking, but like it's so much about this. I'm just like, what is this? It's like 3 minutes and 52 seconds, so it's the shortest song on the album. So there's that. It's got guest vocals by Cloudy Yang. I don't think the guest vocalist is that good either. I'm not a fan of that track at all. It's one of my least favorite tracks of this album. Honestly, one of the least favorite tracks that I've heard out of both albums that I've listened to from this band. I don't know why they put that in there. I mean, if you were going to have something that I guess is a little bit different in tone, don't make it that drastically different, because that sounds like a song from a completely different album by a completely different band by a completely different artist in a completely different genre. It's even more of a bit of total whiplash when you get to track 6, which is Savior and the Clockwork. And you've got Turner doing vocals again. You got Byford again and Kiske. And this one's longer. It's more epic. It's got a lot of instrumentals. It's got a lot of orchestral work as well. A lot of long guitar solos. And just that is more of what I liked about this album. Sleepwalking, no. Savior and the Clockwork is a long track. It can get a bit long. It suffers from the same issue that a lot of the tracks did that I've heard that are like longer than 7 minutes, where it feels like it's two songs that are crammed together. And despite that, though, I still liked it. It's not one of my favorites, but I still liked the track. Um, I liked it more than track 7, which is called Invoke the Machine. That one, it's got guest vocals by Ronnie Atkins. Maybe it's the vocals. Maybe that's what I don't like about it. I think that's part of it, but also it I like the blend of symphony and metal. I like the symphonic metal stuff. I like that. I don't like the really heavy, screamy kind of stuff that makes it sound like a generic bit of metal from like the 80s or early 90s. Like I don't really care for that as much. So this is one of those tracks. And also there's just a lot of like heavy guitar work and heavy bass and drums and I don't know. I just wasn't really it was kind of just loud and brash and just not really something I was super big on. It wasn't entirely awful. It's just not something that I cared for as much compared to Savior and the Clockwork, Where Clock Hands Freeze, Black Orchid, Spectres, The Watchmaker's Dream. Um Track 8 is called What's Left of Me. This is more of another ballad, but it's it's more tolerable than Sleepwalking because you have Eric Martin who does the guest vocals here, and he's excellent as always. And this, I think this still has a good hook to it, some good chorus elements, and I don't mind the lyrics. And that one I don't mind. It's definitely a slower song compared to the heavier songs and the faster songs on the album, but it's one of it's in the same vein as where Clock Hands Freeze kind of territory. Number 9, track 9 is called Dweller in a Dream, which also features guest vocals by Kiske. And this is another one I really liked. I really enjoyed this track. It's got a really catchy hook, good chorus, solid guitar work and instrumentals, and some well put together and well written lyrics. Pretty short track too. Um, like that one. Track 10 is called The Great Mystery. This one's like the longest track. Well, no, the longest track was Savior and the Clockwork, but this one I wouldn't say is as good as Savior and the Clockwork for me. Uh, but it still has its moments. It's not a bad finale for the album. It features guest vocals by Bob Catley, Turner, and Byford. And this one, I like the lyrics. They're definitely very creative, like a lot of the other songs are in this album in terms of their lyrics and their overall structure. I think it's got some great symphonic work, some good orchestral instrumentals, and guitar work, and bass work, and percussion, and the vocals are pretty good. So that one though does drag a little too much for me, but still not too bad. So I would say really there's only like a couple songs here that I really didn't like, honestly, in Sleepwalking and Invoke the Machine. So I mean that's pretty good, but there's a handful of other tracks though where I was kind of like, okay, I didn't mind it, but I didn't love it. What's Left of Me, The Great Mystery, where The Watchmaker's Dream, where Clock Hands Freeze. But I really like Spectres. I loved Black Orchid. Um, and I also really liked Dweller in a Dream. Um, and I would say honestly, I really saying where Clock Hands Freeze. I would say I actually like that more than just okay. So yeah, overall, pretty good album. I liked it. If you like symphonic metal, I definitely would recommend it. Now, the next album you asked me to share my thoughts on is Ghostlights, and this one came out in 2016. And the plot of the album, it concludes the story that was started with the Mystery of Time. It's darker and it's more theatrical. Um, Samet apparently in interviews has said that this was something he just decided to do at the spur of the moment. It wasn't necessarily planned to be that way. Um, Samet comments about the title, saying, the whole concept of this album deals with questionable ideals you have in life. It depends on which philosophy of life you have. Such ideals can be very different from each other, and it's about distractions to find the crossfires on the way to find out what you really want from life. It's what he believes Ghostlights means. And this one I also liked. I probably would say I liked it as much as the previous album, because kind of the same balance of tracks that I liked and tracks that I wasn't really big on. Um, Track one is called "Mystery of a Blood Red Rose." I really liked the opening track. Um, it definitely reminded me of something that Jim Steinman would have wrote for a Meatloaf song or an album, and it was intended to have Meatloaf as the lead singer. And his management was initially positive about having him perform on the album, but then they declined. Which that would have made this song even better. Like, it's still a good song, but this would have made that song almost legendary because it definitely has that feel. It sounds like something that Meatloaf would have sung and Jim Steinman would have created for Meatloaf. It's got that rock opera feel to it. Um, it's got the same sort of vibe and style in terms of its composition. The vocals are still strong enough, but it's not Meatloaf. And it's got some good guitar work and everything. I like the lyrics. That is definitely one of my favorite tracks of the album. Track two is called "Let the Storm Descend Upon You." I didn't like this track. This is, I would say, my second most disliked track of this album, next to track six. This was way too long. It was 12 minutes. It felt like it, and then some. There's a lot of stuff being done that's very experimental that I don't really think really helped the track any. Like some really crappy, bad sounding stuff they did with in post. And there's a lot of just really lengthy solos, and this honestly sounds like the kind of song that Jack Black's character in School of Rock played with his band that like caused like half the people in the bar to leave like halfway through the song. But Jack Black is rocking out and acting like he's singing the greatest song ever. That's what this song reminds me of. "Let the Storm Descend Upon You." This one features guest vocalists Jorn Lande, Ronnie Atkins, and Robert Mason. Um, it's still got some good guitar work. I think it's a bit self-indulgent, and I think this is a track that is just way too goddamn long. But there's still some good things about it, but I still didn't like it. Track three, though, "The Haunting," I liked a lot more. And the big reason why is that not one of, the main guest vocalist is Dee Snider from Twisted Sister, who I really think is an underrated artist in general. And I've always been a big fan of his. And even his solo work, like he did some stuff for the Strangeland soundtrack, which I think is really damn good and doesn't get enough credit. And he does some great stuff here, kind of similar to the Strangeland stuff. Just he's really good at playing a creepy metal character, like a metal version of some kind of creepy narrator. Like he's really good at doing that. And this track is no exception. He plays a character named Nightmare, and I just think it's a very unique track with the composition, the style of it, the way it flows. Um, I think it's got some good vocals, especially by D. Snyder. I like the instrumentals. Definitely one of my favorite tracks of the album. Um, I would say I don't know if it is my favorite because I really like Ghostlights and I really liked Unchain the Light. But it's still up there when it comes to my personal favorite tracks of this album. Track 4 is called Seduction of Decay. It's another one that I liked, even though it's a bit too long. This one features guest vocals by GF Tate, and that guy can still sing his ass off, and his vocals are incredible on this. And I like the lyrics. I like the story he was telling, and I really like the instrumental work and the guitar work, and it's got a good chorus. It's just a bit too long, but I still like that track quite a bit. Track 5 is called Ghostlights. This one features, Michael Kiske, who is the guest vocalist on this one. This is the title track, and it honestly doesn't disappoint that much. It's 5 minutes 43 seconds, so it's a good length. It delivers what you're looking for out of Avantasia in terms of like the mix of traditional metal and symphonic metal and orchestral work and high concept lyrics, and the vocals are not too bad either. That's definitely a pretty good track overall. Track 6, Draconian Love, I hated. I hated this. I hated. I almost said album, but that's not true. I didn't hate this album. I just hated the song. This is my least favorite song next to that sappy one that sounded like a pop song, ballad, duet that would be on the compilation album. But this one sucked too. A lot of like really lame post processing shit where they messed around with the vocals with a vocoder, or I don't know if that's the right word, but it just seems like they messed around with in post with a lot of different sort of stuff. Like they messed around with auto tune and stuff with different little things that they messed around with the song when it comes to like manipulating it digitally in such an artificial way, and it was very glaring and obvious. And then you had annoying attempts at a hook and a chorus, like "My draconian love, my draconian love," and a bit that honestly sounded like something that you would hear if Fat Albert did a metal album. Hey, 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 my draconian love, my draconian love. Hey, hey, hey. Yeah, I did not like that song at all. The guest vocalist wasn't very good either. Herbie Langens, I did not care for that track. I thought it was terrible. Track 7, Master of the Pendulum, is so much better, featuring guest vocal work by Marco Hietala. And uh, I like the lyrics of this one. It's a good companion piece to Mystery of Time because it actually does. I think it's supposed to tie into that, and I did like the overall structure of the song. There's a good length, good vocals, had some good solo work, some good guitar stuff in there. Definitely one of the better tracks on the album. Track 8 is called Isle Evermore. I think this one is one of the more underrated tracks. This one features guest vocals by Sharon Den and Adel, and this is a slower song, but it's just very haunting and mesmerizing in its own way. I think a lot of it has to do with the simple but really effective composition of the song in terms of the instrumentals and Sharon's vocals. She was spectacular. Her vocals are s- just genuinely stunning. So I think that's a big part of why I really liked that track. Even though it's not really a metal song, it's more of a almost kind of like an aria. It's kind of that sort of vibe. But it's still, in my opinion, a good song and a good track on the album. Track 9 is called Babylon Vampires, which also features Mason as a guest vocalist. And I really wasn't a massive fan of this one either. There's some good stuff about it. I do like some of the guitar work. I do like, I think it's the chorus. I don't mind the chorus. But it's another one that's a little too long in the tooth, and has some moments too where the tone and it is kind of clashing, and then the genres are kind of not really blending together that well. But it's still an okay track. Track 10 is another one that I really wasn't a big fan of. This one features guest vocals by Lande. And this one, I see what they're trying to do. It's trying to be another slower sort of song, ballad almost, with a duet in the center of it all, and talking about light and darkness. And the lyrics weren't bad. It's just I didn't really care for the vocals that much, or just the instrumental work, or just honestly, just the way the song was just put together in general. Like the lyrics weren't the problem. It's just the song itself is just very below average and forgettable. Track 11, Unchain the Light. I really like this one. This one features guest vocals by Atkins and Kiske, and this one is fast, heavy. It's a rush, has a really catchy chorus, good hook, good vocals, good guitar work. It's a good track from beginning to end. And track 12 is called A Restless Heart and Obsidian Skies, featuring guest vocals by Bob Catley. And this one is fine. It's not a track that I really consider to be a highlight of the album, but it's not a bad track though. The lyrics are well written. The overall composition and structure, and the way that the song is built is pretty solid. And once again, you got some good guitar work and symphonic stuff, and it's a adequate enough finale for the album. And I didn't really mention a lot of this when I was talking about the previous album, or when I was talking about this album, but Tobias Sammet does a lot of singing himself throughout different tracks in the album, uh, and honestly throughout all of his albums. And I think he's a solid vocalist, but I don't think he's as good as some of his guest vocalists. So when he has somebody like Eric Martin, or D. Snyder, Geoff Tate, and then he's like trying to sing with them. Like it's a pretty steep drop off at points, but it's still not what I would consider to be poor vocals. It's just he's not Geoff Tate. He's not on that level. Um, but for the most part, I felt that they still harmonized well enough, despite the fact that you could tell that like he's just not on the same level as some of these other guest vocalists. And Tobias does a good job writing these songs for the most part, and it was it was a pretty good album. I'm not gonna say that I think it's considerably better than the other one that I listened to, The Mystery of Time. I think they're pretty much about the same quality wise. And I would recommend this one too if you're a fan of symphonic metal, Ghostlights. Now, the singular track that he asked me about is Ghost in the Moon from the album Moonglow. And I definitely liked this track, but I didn't love it. And the reason for that is this track is another one that's too long, and it feels like it's two songs that are just barely stitched together. And this one feels like that more than some of the other ones that I heard that were really long. Uh, I think it's got some great vocals by Tobias, and I definitely love the instrumentals, the orchestral work, the stuff they did with the piano and all this other stuff in the track, and the guitars, and it's a really good track from that perspective. Instrumental work alone, and the vocals are still at least above average, and I think the lyrics are good, and I think it's got a really catchy hook and a good chorus, but it goes to the point where I think it's like 5 or 6 minutes in, and then it just tails off, and then it starts up again, and it's almost like the song is now a different type of song until it then becomes the same type of song in terms of the genre and the style as it was when it started, and I just wasn't really a big fan of that. I wasn't enamored with that approach, to say the least. I still liked the track though, mainly for the really excellent instrumental work and the guitar work, and a genuinely catchy hook. But it's not what I would say one of my favorite Avantasia songs that I've heard so far. But it was good enough that I want to go further and listen to more of this album, and I want to, and I'm definitely gonna add more Avantasia albums to my playlist. I'm gonna check out more from this band going forward. So yeah, that's just my thoughts on Avantasia. Couple albums by them, as well as a singular track from their album Moonglow. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.